So, what happens when an entire society just turns on itself? The first century historian Josephus gives us this absolutely terrifying first-hand look in his work, The Jewish War. He describes a time when the province of Judea wasn't just fighting some outside enemy, no, it was being consumed by a fire that was lit from within.
Just let that sink in for a second. That one sentence from Josephus just paints this incredibly chilling picture. This wasn't some conventional war with rules of engagement. This was a total societal collapse. Your neighbor was now your enemy, and your survival, well, it literally depended on destroying them. So how on earth did things get this bad?
You know how they say every fire starts with a single spark? Well, for the province-wide inferno Josephus is describing, that spark was a truly horrific massacre in the coastal city of Caesarea.
And the speed and the sheer scale of the violence here, it's just staggering. Josephus tells us that in a single hour, 1 hour, over 20,000 Jews were slaughtered by their neighbors in Caesarea. The city was, and this is his phrase, emptied of its Jewish inhabitants. An entire community just wiped out in an afternoon.
Now, an act of violence like that, it doesn't stay contained. The news of the massacre just spread like wildfire, and it ignited this rage that consumed the entire Jewish nation. And that rage immediately turned into action. People started forming armed groups, not for defense. Oh no, this was about revenge.
The retaliation was incredibly swift and just as brutal. Jewish forces just swept across the region, laying waste to Syrian villages and cities. They burned everything, they demolished towns, and they plundered homes, unleashing this wave of pure vengeance that led to an immense slaughter of their own.
But violence just creates more violence, right? The Syrians hit back with just as much ferocity, and suddenly the entire province is plunged into this devastating, vicious cycle of revenge. And the consequences, well, they were beyond horrific.
Josephus gives us this truly grim snapshot of daily life. Just try to imagine it. Your days are spent in constant slaughter, but then the nights come, and the fear of what might happen next is somehow even worse than the violence you just witnessed. There was no escape, just bloodshed and pure terror.
And pretty soon, the conflict just spiraled completely out of control. It became an excuse to settle old grudges. And for a lot of people, it was a chance to get rich off the chaos. Greed, Josephus tells us, became a huge motivator. People weren't just killing their neighbors out of hatred anymore. They were doing it to steal their stuff. And the people who were best at it, they were celebrated as heroes. It's insane.
The result of all this was just a landscape of pure death and destruction. The cities were filled with unburied bodies, old men, women, even infants. The whole province, as Josephus puts it, was full of inexpressible calamities.
But amidst all this chaos, Josephus zeroes in on one particularly harrowing story. It's a story that reveals the kinds of impossible, soul-crushing choices people were forced to make. And it all happens in the city of Scythopolis.
Okay, so the situation in Scythopolis was unique. The Jewish community there made an incredibly difficult calculation. They figured their best shot at survival was to prove how loyal they were to their non-Jewish neighbors. So they actually took up arms and fought against other Jews who came to attack the city. They chose their own safety over their kinship.
But here's the gut-wrenching part. Their loyalty was never really trusted. The people of Scythopolis, still deeply suspicious, came up with this chillingly calculated plan. They told their Jewish allies, hey, why don't you and your families go camp in that grove nearby? And for 2 days, they lulled them into a false sense of security. Then, in the dead of night, they ambushed them and slaughtered every single one.
Over 13,000 Jews were killed in this single act of betrayal. And you have to remember, these are the same people who had just fought and bled to defend the city. It was just a shocking, cold-blooded massacre.
And out of this horror, we get the personal tragedy of a man named Simon. He was a Jewish warrior, known for his incredible strength, and he had been absolutely essential to the victories of Scythopolis, even killing his own countrymen to prove his loyalty. So now, he's surrounded by his enemies, and in that moment, the terrible weight of his choices just comes crashing down on him. He accepts his fate, not as some tragic victim, but as a just punishment for his own betrayal. His death, he decides, is going to be his own final act of judgment. And what happens next? It's one of the most brutal scenes in Josephus's entire account. Simon methodically executes his whole family, his father, his mother, his wife, and his children.
Josephus says they willingly accepted it to avoid capture by the enemy. Then he stands on their bodies, making sure everyone can see him, and he takes his own life. Just a truly horrific end to an impossible choice.
Now, this level of chaos, this kind of internal warfare, it's not going to go unnoticed forever. The escalating violence across the entire province finally forced the hand of the regional superpower, Rome.
And this violence wasn't just in Judea. Down in Alexandria, similar tensions between the Greek and Jewish populations have been simmering for years, and they finally just exploded. After a group of Jews threatened a local theater, the Roman governor decided to make a brutal, bloody example of them.
He unleashed 2 full Roman legions. That's almost 10,000 heavily armed professional soldiers on the Jewish quarter of the city. He gave them permission not just to kill, but to plunder and burn. And the result was a massacre on an almost unimaginable scale. 50,000 people lay dead before the governor finally called his soldiers back.
So, seeing the whole region just descending into total anarchy, the Roman governor of Syria, a man named Cestius Calluss, decided he couldn't just stand by anymore. He mobilized a massive army to crush these insurrections once and for all.
And this was a campaign of overwhelming force. Cestius brought the full might of the Roman military and its allies, and they just marched through the region, burning cities, slaughtering thousands, and systematically stamping out any pockets of resistance they could find.
And so, just like that, the civil war that had torn the province apart, well, it finally came to an end. Not because of any peace treaty or reconciliation, but because it was crushed by the overwhelming and absolutely ruthless force of the Roman Empire.
Which, of course, leaves us with the lingering question. After so much bloodshed, both from inside and from out, was there any hope left for peace? Or had the cycle of violence simply gone too far, making an all-out war with the Roman Empire not just possible, but completely inevitable?